Hold on tight, for a shocking event in Israel is upending religious views all throughout the world. However, there's more. The Jewish people are acting in an unexpected way inside the boundaries of Israel. Experts predict that it won't be simple, particularly in light of the current conflict and Israeli reforms. How will the Jews accomplish this amazing task? And will the Muslim community permit it to take place? It's time to watch this film now and learn the astounding details of this incredible voyage. But before we start, don't forget to subscribe and turn on the bell to receive the latest notification from us. In only a few short weeks, people's perceptions of Israel have changed, and we'll see why Israel chose to retaliate against attacks on its citizens. A profound event in Israel is upending religious views all throughout the world. Despite continuous war and reforms, the Jewish people in Israel are taking a bold step to recover their birthright and restore their ancient house of worship. I believe that the events of October 7, 2023 are still fresh in the minds of Israelis who faced attacks from Islamic extremists, leading to questions about retaliation and moral dilemmas. Thousands of armed Hamas terrorists tore down large parts of the Gaza security fence using tractors, RPGs, and explosives, and invaded southern Israel. Simultaneously, Hamas terrorists in Gaza fired thousands of rockets toward Israel. Of course, October 7th will forever be remembered as a dark day in Israel's history and in humanity's history. A reminder that there are humans capable of utterly inhumane things. Despite these challenges, an unexpected development within Israel's borders caught the attention of the Jewish community, leading to the rebuilding of the Third Temple, with opposition from various groups. The history of Israel dates back to the Old Testament, where Abram's journey to Canaan is mentioned, and the land has seen the rise and fall of empires, including the Unud monarchy period under King Saul, King David, and King Solomon. Jerusalem holds immense historical and religious significance for Judaism, Christianity, and Islam, with the Temple Mount being a sacred place for worship and pilgrimage. But its complex history has led to tensions and conflicts, particularly in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Before we go to discover big problems here, let's review the history of this country. Israel is a small country in the Middle East, about the size of New Jersey, located on the eastern shores of the Mediterranean Sea and bordered by Egypt, Jordan, Lebanon, Syria. The nation of Israel, with a population of more than 9 million people, most of them Jewish, has many important archaeological and religious sites considered sacred by Jews, Muslims, and Christians alike. A complex history with periods of peace. Much of what scholars know about Israel's ancient history comes from the Hebrew Bible. According to the text, Israel's origins can be traced back to Abraham, who is considered the father of both Judaism and Islam. Abraham's descendants were thought to have been enslaved by the Egyptians for hundreds of years before settling in Canaan, which is approximately the region of modern-day Israel. And the word Israel comes from Abraham's grandson Jacob, who was renamed Israel by the Hebrew God in the Bible. King David ruled the region around 1000 BC. His son, who became King Solomon, is credited with building the first holy temple in the world. In ancient Jerusalem in about 931 BC, the area was divided into two kingdoms, Israel in the north and Judah in the south. Around 722 BC, the Assyrians invaded and destroyed the northern kingdom of Israel. In 568 BC, the Babylonians conquered Jerusalem and destroyed the first temple, which was replaced by a second temple in about 516 BC for the next several centuries. The land of modern-day Israel was conquered and ruled by various groups, including the Persians, Greeks, Romans, Arabs, Fatimids, Seljuk Turks, Crusaders, Egyptians, Mamluks, Islamists, and others. From 1517 to 1917, what is today Israel, along with much of the Middle East, was ruled by the Ottoman Empire. But World War I dramatically altered the geopolitical landscape in the Middle East. In 1917, at the height of the war, British Foreign Secretary Arthur James Balfour submitted a letter of intent supporting the establishment of a Jewish homeland in Palestine. The British government hoped that the formal declaration known thereafter as the Balfour Declaration would encourage support for the Allies in World War. When World War ended in 1918 with an Allied victory, the 400-year Ottoman Empire rule ended and Great Britain took control over what became known as Palestine. The Balfour Declaration and the British mandate over Palestine were approved by the League of Nations in 1918. In 1922, Arabs vehemently opposed the Balfour Declaration, concerned that a Jewish homeland would mean the subjugation of Arab Palestinians. The British controlled Palestine until Israel, in the years following the end of World War II, became an independent state in 1947. On May 14, 1948, on the day in which the British mandate over Palestine expired, the Jewish People's Council gathered at the Tel Aviv Museum and approved the following proclamation, declaring the establishment of the State of Israel. Throughout Israel's long history, tensions between Jews and Arab Muslims have existed. The complex hostility between the two groups dates all the way back to ancient times, when they both populated the area and deemed it holy. Both Jews and Muslims consider the city of Jerusalem sacred. It contains the Temple Mount, which includes the holy sites of Al-Aqsa Mosque, the Western Wall, the Dome of the Rock, and more. In the late 19th and early 20th century, an organized religious and political movement known as Zionism emerged among Jews. Zionists wanted to reestablish the Jewish homeland in Palestine. Massive numbers of Jews immigrated to the ancient Holy Land and built settlements. Between 1882 and 1903, about 35,000 Jews relocated to Palestine. Another 40 settled in the area between 1904 and 1914. Many Jews living in Europe and elsewhere, fearing persecution during the Nazi reign, found refuge in Palestine and embraced Zionism. After the Holocaust and World War II had ended, members of the Zionist movement primarily focused on creating an independent Jewish state. Arabs in Palestine resisted the Zionism movement, and tensions between the two groups continued. An Arab nationalist movement developed as a result. Following the announcement of an independent Israel, 5 Arab nations, Egypt, Jordan, Iraq, Syria, and Lebanon, immediately invaded the region in what became known as the 1948 Arab-Israeli War. Civil war broke out throughout all of Israel. But a ceasefire agreement was reached in 1949. As part of the temporary armistice agreement, the West Bank became part of Jordan, and the Gaza Strip became Egyptian territory. Clashes between Israelis and Palestinians are still commonplace. Key territories of land are divided, but some are claimed by both groups. For instance, they both cite Jerusalem as their capital. Both groups blame each other for terror attacks that kill civilians. While Israel doesn't officially recognize Palestine as a state, more than 135 unmember nations do. In October 2023, Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu formally declared war on Hamas following a surprise deadly assault launched from Gaza by Hamas militants. The Temple Mount, located in the old city of Jerusalem, is considered one of the holiest sites in Judaism and Islam and is central to the Christian Gospels. It is also known as Haram al-Sharif in Islam, which means the noble sanctuary. For decades, it has been one of the most politically sensitive areas globally. In early April, as Jews celebrate Passover and Muslims mark Ramadan, tensions flared at the holy site amid an Israeli police operation to remove a group of Palestinians who had stockpiled rocks and improvised explosives allegedly for use against Jewish visitors to the site, and had been reportedly planned weeks by the rioters. The police action sparked international condemnation, especially among Muslims, and was used as justification by terror groups to carry out terror and rocket attacks against Israel. Why is the Temple Mount important? The Temple Mount has a long and complex history with significant religious and historical importance for each of the Abrahamic faiths. For Jews, the Temple Mount is the holiest site in Judaism and is where the first and second holy temples, which were destroyed in ancient times, once stood. The area served as the spiritual center of the Jewish people for centuries, and it remains a focal point of Jewish liturgy and collective identity. For Muslims, Al-Aqsa at the Haram al-Sharif was the destination of the Prophet Muhammad. On a miraculous night journey from Mecca, according to Islamic tradition, from the stone house in the Dome of the Rock, he is said to have ascended to heaven in a prophetic vision to meet the biblical prophets. It was also the first site toward which Muhammad and his followers directed prayers before they started facing the Kaaba in Mecca. As a result, the sacred precinct of Al-Aqsa Mosque is considered one of the three holiest sites in Islam. How did Israel gain control over the Temple Mount? Israel gained control over the Temple Mount during the 1967 Six-Day War, when Israeli forces captured the old city of Jerusalem, which includes the Temple Mount, from Jordan. After Israel took control of the Temple Mount, it granted the Islamic Waqf responsibility for the administration of the site. The Islamic Waqf was first established by Muslim military leader Saladin in 1187 CE, following his recapture of Jerusalem from the Crusaders. Shortly after Israel took control of Jerusalem in 1967, then Israeli Defense Minister Moshe Dayan, who personally oversaw the capture of East Jerusalem during the war, recognized the historic magnitude of the event, but also the sensitivities associated with the Temple Mount. Dayan stated, "We have returned to the holiest of our places, never to be parted from them again. We did not come to conquer the sacred sites of others or to restrict their religious rights, but rather to ensure the integrity of the city and to live in it with others in fraternity." It is under this mindset that the status quo is honored. Under the status quo, Israel maintains overall security control of the Temple Mount, while the Waqf is responsible for day-to-day management and maintenance of the site. The Waqf is responsible for ensuring that the site is open to Muslim worshippers and visitors, and for protecting the religious and cultural heritage of the site. In practice, this means that Israeli police manage access to the site and monitor activity, while the Waqf is responsible for managing the site's religious affairs, such as prayer times and religious services. Jewish visitors are allowed to visit the Temple Mount during certain times, but are not permitted to pray there in order to avoid provoking interreligious conflict. Instead, Jews are allowed to pray at the Western Wall, which is located adjacent to the Temple Mount, and is considered the closest accessible site to the Holy of Holies, the innermost chamber of the ancient Jewish temple. Additionally, there is ongoing debate and controversy within the Jewish community about whether Jews should be allowed to pray on the Temple Mount. The Chief Rabbinate of Israel and many other rabbinic authorities prohibit Jews from visiting the Temple Mount for religious reasons pertaining to concerns about purity and desecration of the site's sanctity. Recently, the idea of rebuilding the Third Temple has been a significant and controversial topic, especially in the context of Israeli history, religious beliefs, and geopolitical dynamics in the Middle East. The Third Temple holds immense historical and religious significance for Judaism. It is believed to be a future holy temple, prophesied in the Hebrew Bible. The first temple built by King Solomon was destroyed by the Babylonians in 586 BC. The second temple was later constructed on the same site and was destroyed by the Romans in 70 CE. The rebuilding of the Third Temple is seen by some as a fulfillment of biblical prophecy. Several questions remain open in the proposal. Who would be in charge of the new temple? What would happen to the Al-Aqsa Mosque? One of the most sacred sites in Islam, located on the Temple Mount. What would the consequences of rebuilding a new Jewish temple be amid the complex, flashpoint geopolitical atmosphere of the Middle East? This may be another far-fetched attempt that is ignored by authorities, but the fact that a prestigious architect who is secular and doesn't have any political background is involved in such a project makes this case all the more interesting, if not more tangible. Plans to rebuild the third Jewish temple on the Temple Mount, the holiest site in Judaism, and the third holiest in Islam are not new, but mostly face strong resistance. In 1990, a deadly riot erupted on the Mount after a fringe Jewish group tried to lay the cornerstone of a third temple. The Temple Mount in Jerusalem is the traditional site for the construction of the third temple. However, this area is also known as Haram al-Sharif to Muslims and is one of the holiest sites in Islam. The site's religious significance to both Jews and Muslims has made any changes or construction plans on the Temple Mount highly contentious and politically sensitive. However, this plan is facing many challenges and controversies. The idea of rebuilding the third temple is not without challenges. It involves complex religious, political, and logistical considerations. Any attempts to build the temple are likely to face opposition from various groups, including Palestinian Muslims, other Arab states, and even some Jewish sects who believe that the timing and circumstances for rebuilding the temple are not yet right. The rebuilding of the third temple is intertwined with the broader Israeli-Palestinian conflict and the complex geopolitics of the Middle East. Any moves related to the Temple Mount can have significant implications for regional stability and relations between Israel and its neighbors. It's important to note that the rebuilding of the third temple is a deeply sensitive and nuanced issue with implications that extend far beyond religious beliefs, touching on geopolitics, history, and the identity of different communities in the region. Our materials for the third temple ready for a number of years, especially back in the 70s. There were rumors that pre-cut stones had been cut in America and shipped to Israel for the building of the third temple. Evangelist John Wesley White wrote, "Anyone who's ever visited Israel will immediately be impressed that stones are everywhere. In fact, Israel actually exports them, and they have the highest quality of pure white limestone in abundance. Whether pre-cut stones have already been made in Israel is another matter. Though rumors abound, no concrete evidence has come forward to support this idea." During 1982 military action in Lebanon, the Israeli army discovered and captured huge stores of Russian and Syrian weaponry stored in secret bunkers and tunnels in preparation for a northern invasion. It was also reported by very reliable sources that a large supply of the famous Lebanese cedar was also recovered and is safely stored away for use. In the construction of the third temple, if a new temple is to be constructed, then there must be a functioning priesthood to perform the proper rites and ceremonies. But such a priesthood is now in the works. In an old stone building in the old city of Jerusalem, a small group of young scholars are preparing for the building of the third temple and the coming of the Messiah. The founder of one particular yeshiva is Moti HaKohen. HaKohen knew he was a priest, but that never affected his life very much. Until, that is, the day he looked up from his open Talmud while he was studying at yeshiva on the Golan Heights and saw a friend poring over a tractate dealing with the laws of the temple and the priesthood. HaKohen then began a search for a yeshiva that could teach him matters concerning the rebuilding of the temple. One of the main issues surrounding the third temple is the long-lost Ark of the Covenant. What will be its place, if any, in the third temple? The last mention of the Ark is in 2 Chronicles 35:3, where it is placed back into the temple in the realm of King Josiah. There was no Ark in the second temple. There is no concrete evidence today that the Ark still exists or that someone has it. Does the Ark exist? If it does, will it appear before the third temple is consecrated? Most Orthodox Jewish believers in Jerusalem who are working towards the building of the third temple believe that the Ark of the Covenant is safely hidden in a chamber under the Temple Mount. They feel certain God has preserved the Ark for 25 centuries and that it will be available when the temple is restored. The issue of the Ark, its history, and its present location is reserved for a later discussion. Some rabbis claim that one of the things necessary for a third temple is the ashes of the red heifer. Of all the sacrifices for sin mentioned in the Old Testament, only the slaying of the red heifer was outside the camp. That is, not in the temple. Numbers chapter 19 describes this offering and instructions for preparing water for ritual purification from the ashes of the sacrificed animal. After it had been burned, red heifers without spot or blemish are today being bred and raised by at least one group in the United States. Reverend Clyde Lott, who writes in a new 1995 Jewish publication, American amateur archaeologist Vendell Jones of Arlington, Texas, has for many years been searching in caves near Qumran for the ashes of the last red heifer sacrificed before the destruction. As I mentioned, rebuilding the third temple in Jerusalem is a complex and multifaceted task that presents several significant challenges. The Temple Mount, where the previous temple stood, is considered one of the holiest sites in Judaism. Rebuilding the temple holds immense religious significance for many Jews, as it is believed to fulfill biblical prophecies. However, the site is also sacred in Islam, which adds religious complexity and sensitivity to any plans for reconstruction. Jerusalem is a city with deep religious and political significance for Jews, Christians, and Muslims. The Temple Mount is at the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, and any attempts to rebuild the temple would likely be met with strong opposition from Palestinians, in Arab states, and the broader Muslim world. The political ramifications of such a project could be far-reaching and could potentially escalate tensions in the region. Besides that, the Temple Mount is a highly regulated area, and any construction activities would need to navigate complex legal and logistical hurdles. This includes obtaining permits, adhering to archaeological and historical preservation laws, and addressing concerns related to land ownership. And access designing and constructing a temple that adheres to religious specifications while meeting modern building codes and standards would be a significant architectural and engineering challenge. The temple would need to be structurally sound, aesthetically pleasing, and functional for religious ceremonies and rituals. Moreover, rebuilding the third temple would require substantial financial resources. Funding such a project would likely involve contributions from religious organizations, private donors, and possibly government support. Raising the necessary funds could be a significant obstacle. Meanwhile, the reconstruction of the temple would have social and cultural implications both within Israel and internationally. It could impact interfaith relations, cultural heritage, and the identity of Jerusalem as a city sacred to multiple religions. The rebuilding of the temple would have implications for Israel's relations with other countries, particularly those in the Middle East. It could affect diplomatic efforts and peace negotiations in the region, potentially complicating efforts to resolve the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Overall, the rebuilding of the third temple is a complex and sensitive undertaking that would require careful consideration of religious, political, legal, logistical, financial, and diplomatic factors. It is a topic that is deeply intertwined with the broader issues of religion, history, and geopolitics in the Middle East. Open dialogue and international mediation are crucial for finding peace in the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially regarding the sensitive issue of the third temple. International mediators like the United States play a key role in Israeli-Palestinian discussions, with various proposed methods for reconciling the challenges of the third temple, including the idea of a shared religious space for diverse religious traditions. Open dialogue is crucial for finding peace in the ongoing conflict between Israel and Palestine, especially regarding sensitive matters like the third temple and support for this dialogue is important for achieving reconciliation. Thank you so much for watching. That's all about today's video. If you like this video, please give us a like. Don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell to watch the latest videos from our channel. Hope to see you in the next videos.